The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 6 months. Agent Riley Washington rolled over and hit the snooze button, allowing herself exactly 5 more minutes of sleep before starting what would turn out to be the most important day of her career. She had no idea what was coming. Riley had been working as an FBI agent for 8 years, but this case was different. For half a year, she'd been living a double life, pretending to be someone else while investigating one of the biggest car theft rings the Bureau had ever encountered. The criminals weren't just stealing cars. They were selling them through a network that reached into police departments, government offices, and courtrooms across 3 states. The worst part? Some of the thieves were wearing badges. Detective Vincent Torres had been on the force for 15 years. On paper, he looked like a model officer. Community awards, commendations from the mayor, even a local newspaper article calling him Officer of the Year 2 years running. But Riley's investigation had uncovered a different story. Torres and his crew were stealing luxury cars right off the streets, then selling them to dealers who would ship them overseas or chop them up for parts. They were good at it, too. Almost too good. Riley climbed out of bed and walked to her closet, pulling out a simple black sweater and jeans. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. In her line of work, blending in was everything. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and smiled slightly. Her mother always said she had a face people trusted. That trust had served her well in this investigation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent David Chen, her handler on this case. Coffee at 8, same place. Big day ahead, Riley knew what he meant. Today was the day they'd been working toward for months. The evidence was finally ready. Photos, recordings, financial records, everything they needed to bring down Torres and his entire operation. All they needed was one final meeting to coordinate the arrests. She grabbed her car keys from the kitchen counter and headed for the door. Her black BMW sat in the driveway, looking as ordinary as any other car in the neighborhood. She'd bought it 2 years ago with money she'd saved from working overtime cases. It wasn't the fanciest car on the road, but it was reliable, and more importantly, it was hers. As she drove through the quiet morning streets, Riley thought about how this case had consumed her life. She'd spent countless hours watching Torres and his crew, learning their patterns, documenting their crimes. She'd seen them steal cars from hospital parking lots while families visited sick relatives. She'd watched them target vehicles outside churches during Sunday services. These weren't just criminals. They were predators who fed on people's trust and vulnerability. The coffee shop where she was meeting Chen sat 3 blocks away from the police station where Torres worked. It was a small, family-owned place that served the kind of strong coffee that kept agents awake during long surveillance shifts. Riley had been there dozens of times over the past months, always careful to vary her routine, never staying too long in one place. What she didn't know was that Torres had been watching too. For weeks, the detective had been growing paranoid. His fence, a man named Bobby Torino who ran a used car lot on the south side of town, had been nervous about federal attention. Bobby had good reason to worry. His lot was where most of the stolen cars ended up before being shipped out of state. He'd started seeing unfamiliar faces around the neighborhood, cars that seemed to show up in the same places too often. There's heat coming, Bobby had warned Torres just 3 days earlier. Federal heat. Someone's watching us. Torres had laughed it off at first. He'd been running this operation for 3 years without any serious problems. His crew was careful, professional, and most importantly, they had protection within the system. Who would dare investigate them? But doubt had a way of growing in the dark corners of a guilty mind. That morning, as Riley parked her BMW outside the coffee shop, Torres was sitting in his patrol car 2 blocks away. He'd been making irregular patrols through this area, telling himself he was just being cautious. When he saw the black BMW, the same one he'd noticed several times over the past month, his suspicions crystallized into something harder. He picked up his radio and called officers Ray Mitchell and Tony Ricci, 2 members of his crew who were supposed to be patrolling nearby areas. "I've got eyes on a suspicious vehicle," Torres said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "Black BMW license plate." He squinted at the numbers and read them off. "Run it through the system." Inside the coffee shop, Riley ordered her usual black coffee, no sugar, and found a corner table where she could watch the street while reviewing the case files on her phone. The photos were damning. Torres accepting an envelope of cash from Bobby Torino. Officer Mitchell loading a stolen Mercedes onto a transport truck. Financial records showing unexplained deposits into Torres's bank account. This was it. The end of months of careful work. Chen arrived right on time, sliding into the seat across from Riley with his own cup of coffee. He was a 20-year veteran of the Bureau, the kind of agent who'd seen everything and could stay calm in any situation. But Riley could see the excitement in his eyes. "The warrants came through this morning," Chen said quietly, leaning across the table. "We move at noon. Simultaneous arrests at 6 locations. Torres, Mitchell, Ricci, and 3 others. Plus raids on Torino's lot and 2 other businesses." Riley felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with relief. 6 months of living a lie, of pretending to be someone else, of constantly looking over her shoulder. It was finally going to pay off. "What about the cars?" she asked. "How many do we think we can recover?" "Forensics estimates at least 40 vehicles worth over $2 million, Chen replied. "Some are already overseas, but we should be able to get most of them back to their owners." They spent the next 20 minutes going over the details of the operation. Which agents would handle which arrests, what evidence to prioritize, how to coordinate with local prosecutors who weren't part of the corruption network. It was complex, but they'd planned for every contingency, or so they thought. Outside on the street, Torres was getting impatient. The license plate check had come back clean. No reports of theft, registration current and valid. But something about the situation felt wrong to him. Maybe it was guilt making him paranoid, or maybe it was the instincts that had kept him ahead of the law for so long. He made a decision that would change everything. "Mitchell, Ricci," he called over the radio. "Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street. I want to check something out." "What kind of something?" Mitchell's voice crackled back. "Just get over here and bring backup." As Riley and Chen finished their meeting and prepared to leave, they had no idea that their target was closing in on them. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the next few hours would test everything Riley had learned about courage, justice, and the thin blue line that sometimes becomes a noose. Riley stepped out of the coffee shop feeling confident about the day ahead. The morning sun felt warm on her face as she walked toward her car, keys jingling in her hand. In just a few hours, months of undercover work would finally pay off. Torres and his crew would be behind bars, and dozens of stolen cars would be returned to their rightful owners. She was thinking about calling her mother to share the good news when the first patrol car came, screaming around the corner. The black and white police cruiser skidded to a stop directly in front of her BMW, blocking her path. Riley's training kicked in immediately. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She stopped walking and instinctively moved her hand closer to her concealed weapon, but didn't reach for it. Not yet. 2 more patrol cars appeared from different directions, their sirens wailing and lights flashing. They formed a triangle around her car, trapping it completely. Riley felt her stomach drop as she recognized the officers climbing out of the vehicles. Detective Vincent Torres emerged from the first car, his hand resting on his service weapon. Officers Ray Mitchell and Tony Ricci flanked him on either side, both with their hands on their guns but not drawn yet. A 4th officer she didn't recognize took position behind her, cutting off any escape route. This was her investigation target, and he was treating her like a dangerous criminal. "Step away from the vehicle," Torres shouted, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that cops used when they wanted immediate compliance. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Riley's mind raced through possibilities. Had they figured out who she was? Was this some kind of test? Or were they genuinely confused about something? She decided to play it safe and follow their commands while trying to understand what was happening. "Officers, I think there's been some kind of mistake," she called out, raising her hands slightly but keeping them relaxed. "This is my car. I can show you my registration and—" "I said step away from the vehicle." Torres interrupted, his voice more aggressive now. "Do not reach for anything." A small crowd was starting to gather on the sidewalk. Riley could see people pulling out their phones, some already recording what was unfolding. The last thing she needed was to become a viral video, especially when she was supposed to be working undercover. "Ma'am, we've received reports that this vehicle was FISOR. We need to verify ownership before you can access it." Riley felt a cold realization wash over her. They thought she had stolen her own car. The irony would have been laughable if the situation weren't so serious. Here she was, an FBI agent who had spent months investigating these exact officers for stealing cars, and they were accusing her of being a car thief. "Officers, I understand you're just doing your job," Riley said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "But I purchased this car 2 years ago. I have all the paperwork. My registration is current and I can prove ownership." Torres wasn't buying it. His paranoia had been building for weeks, and seeing this woman, who he'd noticed hanging around their territory too often, claiming ownership of the expensive car just confirmed his suspicions. In his mind, she was either a federal agent or a rival criminal, trying to muscle in on his territory. Either way, she was a threat. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood of the car," Torres commanded, finally drawing his weapon but keeping it pointed at the ground. "We're going to sort this out at the station." Riley felt her heart pounding. She was an armed federal agent being detained by corrupt police officers she was investigating. Every instinct told her to identify herself, to flash her badge and end this nonsense. But doing so would blow her cover and potentially destroy months of work. Worse, it might warn Torres that he was under investigation, giving him time to destroy evidence or flee. She had to make a split-second decision that would affect not just her, but the entire operation. "I'm going to reach into my purse for my ID," she said slowly, making her movements deliberate and visible. "Is that okay?" "Slowly," Mitchell said, though Torres looked like he wanted to object. "Very slowly." Riley reached into her purse, her fingers brushing against her FBI credentials in their hidden compartment. For a moment she hesitated. She could end this right now. But then she thought about all the victims whose cars had been stolen, all the families who had been victimized by these officers, and she made her choice. She pulled out her driver's license instead of her badge. "Here," she said, holding it out toward Mitchell. "Riley Washington. That's me and that's my car." Torres snatched the license from her hand and studied it with suspicious eyes. The address matched the registration he'd run earlier, but that didn't calm his fears. In his experience, criminals were good at creating fake identities. "Where do you work?" Torres demanded. Riley had prepared for this question months ago when she'd first gone undercover. "I'm a consultant for a marketing firm downtown. We do advertising campaigns for local businesses." It was a perfect cover story. Vague enough to avoid detailed questions, but specific enough to sound believable. Chen had even set up fake employment records and business cards to support the identity. "What kind of marketing?" Ricci asked, stepping closer. "Small business advertising mostly. Restaurants, retail stores, service companies. Nothing too exciting." Torres wasn't satisfied. "You've been in this neighborhood a lot lately." "We've seen you." Riley felt a chill run down her spine. They had been watching her. Her careful surveillance of their operation had attracted their attention. She needed to think fast. "I've been working with some clients in this area," she said. "There's a bakery 2 streets over that hired us for a social media campaign, and a small accounting firm that needed help with their website." It was a believable explanation, and Torres couldn't prove it was false without doing extensive checking, but he wasn't ready to let her go. "We're still going to need to verify ownership of this vehicle," he said, "and we'll need to search it to make sure there's no stolen property inside." Riley knew her rights, but she also knew that resisting too strongly would only increase their suspicions. Besides, there was nothing in her car that would compromise her cover. Her FBI equipment was all hidden in her apartment or her office. "I understand," she said, "but can we do this quickly? I have a meeting with a client in an hour." Torres smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That depends on what we find." As the officers began searching her car, Riley noticed Agent Chen's vehicle parked half a block away. He'd obviously seen what was happening and was trying to figure out how to help without blowing both their covers. She caught his eye for just a moment and gave him a barely perceptible shake of her head. "Not yet. Let this play out." The search of her car yielded nothing suspicious. Just the normal items anyone would carry: gym clothes, a phone charger, some case files from her cover job, and a half-empty water bottle. But Torres seemed determined to find something wrong with the situation. "The registration looks legitimate," Mitchell reported after running the paperwork through their system. "No reports of theft, no liens, insurance is current." Torres frowned. His instincts were telling him something was off, but the evidence didn't support his suspicions. Still, he wasn't ready to admit he'd made a mistake. "We're going to need you to come to the station for further verification," he decided. Standard procedure for situations like this. Riley realized she was about to be arrested by the very people she was investigating. The situation had moved far beyond ironic and into dangerous territory. But she also saw an opportunity. If she played this right, she might be able to gather even more evidence against Torres and his crew. "Am I under arrest?" she asked. Torres hesitated. He didn't have probable cause for an arrest, and he knew it. But he also wasn't ready to let her walk away. "You're being detained for questioning regarding possible possession of stolen property," he said, using the legal language that would give him some cover. As they loaded Riley into the back of a patrol car, she caught sight of Chen again. This time she saw him on his phone, undoubtedly calling for backup and trying to figure out how to salvage the operation. The arrests that were supposed to happen in a few hours might have to be moved up, or they might have to be called off entirely. Either way, Riley Washington was about to experience the justice system from a perspective she'd never expected, as a suspect instead of an agent. And the people who were supposed to be protecting and serving were the same ones she'd been working to put behind bars. The irony was complete, but the story was just beginning. The police station felt different when you were sitting in the back of a patrol car instead of walking through the front door with a badge. Riley had visited dozens of precincts during her career, but she'd never seen one from this angle before. The bulletproof glass separating her from Officers Mitchell and Ricci made everything feel surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. As they pulled into the station parking lot, Riley spotted Detective Torres talking animatedly on his phone. Even through the car window, she could see he was agitated about something. She wondered if he was talking to Bobby Torino, the fence who ran the used car lot where most of the stolen vehicles ended up. If Torres was getting nervous, it might mean her cover was still intact. "Out of the car, slowly," Mitchell instructed as he opened her door. His tone was more professional than Torres's had been, and Riley got the impression he wasn't entirely comfortable with how this arrest was being handled. The inside of the station was buzzing with activity. Officers typed reports at their desks, phones rang constantly, and the coffee machine gurgled in the corner like it needed maintenance. Riley had been in hundreds of police stations, but now she was seeing all the details she usually ignored. The scuffed linoleum floors, the flickering fluorescent lights, the wanted posters taped to bulletin boards. Most importantly, she was seeing the other officers' reactions to her arrest. Sergeant Lisa Burke looked up from her desk as they walked Riley toward the interrogation rooms. Burke was one of the few clean cops Riley had identified during her investigation. She'd been on the force for 12 years and had a reputation for being tough but fair. More importantly, she'd never shown up in any of the surveillance photos or financial records connected to the car theft ring. Burke's eyes lingered on Riley's face for a moment longer than necessary. There was something familiar about this woman, but she couldn't place where she might have seen her before. "What's the charge?" Burke asked Mitchell as they passed her desk. "Possible possession of stolen property," Mitchell replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Torres wants to verify ownership of a vehicle." Burke frowned. That sounded like a weak reason for an arrest, especially given the paperwork she could see sticking out of Mitchell's folder. Paperwork that presumably proved the woman owned the car in question. Riley was placed in interview room B, a windowless space with gray walls and a metal table that had seen better decades. The chair was uncomfortable by design, meant to make suspects eager to talk and get out. Riley had conducted interviews in rooms just like this one, but sitting on the other side of the table gave her a new perspective on how intimidating the setup really was. Torres entered the room carrying a thin file, folder, and a cup of coffee that smelled like it had been sitting on a burner for too long. He settled into the chair across from Riley and opened the folder, spreading out copies of her driver's license, car registration, and insurance documents. "So, Riley Washington," he began, pronouncing her name like it tasted bad. "Tell me about your marketing business." Riley had prepared for this line of questioning months ago. "I work for Bright Ideas Marketing. We're a small firm that helps local businesses with advertising campaigns, social media management, website design. Nothing too glamorous, but it pays the bills. And what brings you to our neighborhood so often? Like I mentioned before, I have several clients in the area. There's Paula's Bakery on 3rd Street. I've been helping them with their online presence. And Henderson Accounting asked us to redesign their website." Torres made notes as she spoke, but Riley could tell he wasn't really interested in her marketing work. He was fishing for something else, some inconsistency he could use to justify his suspicions. Expensive car for a marketing consultant, he observed. I saved up for 2 years to buy it, Riley replied. And I got a good deal because it had some minor cosmetic damage that the previous owner wanted fixed. This was actually true. Riley had bought the car from a dealer who'd been eager to move it off his lot because of a small dent in the rear panel. She'd had it repaired for less than $500, making the BMW a genuine bargain. While Torres continued his questioning, Agent Chen was in his own car 3 blocks away, making frantic phone calls to FBI headquarters. The operation they'd spent months planning was falling apart, and he needed to figure out how to salvage it without putting Riley in more danger. Sir, we have a problem, he told Assistant Director Karen Hayes. Our undercover agent has been detained by the targets of her investigation. They don't know who she is, but they're suspicious enough to arrest her. Hayes, a veteran of dozens of complex operations, immediately understood the implications. Do they have probable cause? Not really. They're claiming possible possession of stolen property, but it's her own car and the paperwork is legitimate. It looks like Detective Torres is fishing. How long before her cover is blown? Hard to say. Riley's good at this, but if they dig too deep or hold her too long, someone's going to figure out she's federal. We might need to abort the whole operation. Back in the interrogation room, Torres was growing more frustrated by the minute. Riley's story was holding up under questioning. Her paperwork was legitimate, and she wasn't showing any of the nervous tells he usually saw from guilty suspects. But his instincts were screaming that something was wrong with this situation. I want to call my lawyer, Riley said suddenly. Torres looked up sharply. In his experience, innocent people rarely asked for lawyers right away. This might be the break he was looking for. Why do you need a lawyer if you haven't done anything wrong? He asked. Because I'm sitting in a police interrogation room being accused of stealing my own car, Riley replied. That seems like a good time to get legal advice. She was playing a careful game. Asking for a lawyer would end the interrogation temporarily, but it might also increase Torres's suspicions. On the other hand, it would buy her time and give Chen a chance to figure out how to rescue the operation. Torres leaned back in his chair, studying Riley's face. There was something about her that bothered him, something beyond the circumstances of her arrest. She was too calm, too composed for someone in her situation. Most people would be angry or scared or at least confused. Riley seemed almost professional. You know what I think? Torres said finally. I think you're not who you say you are. Riley felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. I'm exactly who I say I am. Riley Washington, marketing consultant, owner of a legally purchased BMW. What else would I be? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Before Torres could continue his questioning, there was a knock on the interrogation room door. Sergeant Burke stuck her head in, looking concerned. Torres, can I talk to you for a minute? Outside. Torres grudgingly left the room, closing the door behind him. In the hallway, Burke pulled him aside with a serious expression. I ran the license plate myself, she said quietly. Everything checks out. The car is registered to Riley Washington. Insurance is current, no liens, no reports of theft. What exactly are you holding her for? Something's not right about this, Burke. She's been hanging around our area for weeks, asking questions, watching things. My gut says she's up to something. Your gut isn't probable cause, Burke replied firmly. And unless you can come up with some actual evidence of a crime, you need to let her go. We're already on thin ice with this arrest. Torres felt his world starting to shift beneath his feet. If he released Riley now, he'd have to admit he'd made a mistake. But if he kept pushing without evidence, he risked drawing unwanted attention to himself and his operation. Either choice felt like a trap. Give me another hour with her, he said. 30 minutes, Burke compromised. After that, she walks unless you can show me something concrete. As Torres returned to the interrogation room, Riley was thinking about the phone call she was supposed to make. She couldn't call her real lawyer without risking her cover, but she couldn't call Chen directly either. She needed someone who could contact the FBI without revealing her identity. The irony of her situation was becoming almost absurd. She was being held by the very criminals she'd been investigating, in the police station where she'd planned to arrest them, just hours before the operation was supposed to begin. If she hadn't been living through it, she would have laughed at how impossible it all seemed. Torres sat back down and fixed her with what he probably thought was an intimidating stare. Here's what's going to happen, he said. We're going to keep digging until we figure out what you're really up to. And when we do, You're going to wish you'd been honest with me from the start." Riley looked him straight in the eye and smiled slightly. "Detective Torres," she said calmly, "I think you're going to be very surprised by what you find." She had no idea how right she was. The phone call Riley was allowed to make would change everything, though she didn't know it yet. Sitting in the cramped interrogation room, she dialed the number for legal aid services, a legitimate organization that also happened to employ several retired FBI agents who understood coded conversations. "Legal aid. This is Attorney Patricia Coleman," came the professional voice on the other end. "Ms. Coleman, my name is Riley Washington, and I've been detained by police. I need legal representation regarding a vehicle ownership dispute." Riley paused, then added the phrase that would alert Coleman to her real identity. "This involves my family business that deals with imported goods." Coleman, a former federal prosecutor who now handled special cases for agents in compromised situations, immediately understood. Imported goods was code for an ongoing federal operation. "I understand completely. Ms. Washington, I'll be there within the hour. And I'm bringing some colleagues who specialize in these types of family business matters." While Riley was making her coded phone call, Agent Chen was having his own crisis 3 blocks away. The carefully planned arrest scheduled for that afternoon would have to be postponed, possibly indefinitely. Worse, if Riley's cover was blown, Torres and his crew might disappear before they could be brought to justice. Chen's phone buzzed with a text from Coleman. "Package received. Delivery team en route." Meanwhile, Sergeant Burke was having her own doubts about the arrest. She'd run Riley's name through every database she could access, and everything came back clean. Too clean, actually. Most people had some kind of digital footprint. Old traffic tickets, credit inquiries, social media presence. Riley Washington's records looked almost artificially perfect, like someone had carefully constructed an identity. Burke decided to dig deeper. She accessed the federal database system, something she rarely used for routine checks. What she found made her heart skip a beat. Riley Washington wasn't just clean, she was federal. Burke stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The woman sitting in their interrogation room, the woman Torres suspected of being a car thief, was an FBI agent. Not only that, but according to the limited information available, she was assigned to a financial crimes task force that investigated corruption. Burke's mind raced through the implications. If the FBI had an agent working in their area, what were they investigating? And why hadn't anyone told her about it? The answer hit her like a physical blow. They were investigating the department itself. Burke looked around the bullpen with new eyes. Torres was in his office making agitated phone calls. Mitchell and Ricci were at their desks, pretending to do paperwork but clearly nervous about something. The signs had been there for months. Expensive watches on cops' salaries, new cars. Torres's crew always volunteering for certain types of calls. How had she missed it? Burke made a decision that would define the rest of her career. Instead of confronting Torres directly, she walked to interview room B and knocked on the door. "Time's up," she told Torres when he answered. "Cut her loose." "I need more time," Torres protested. "No, you don't. Her story checks out, her paperwork is legitimate, and we have no evidence of any crime. Release her now or I'm calling the captain." Torres wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in Burke's eyes. Reluctantly, he returned to the interrogation room where Riley was waiting. "You're free to go," he said curtly. "But stay away from this neighborhood. If I see you around here again, I'll find a reason to bring you back in." Riley gathered her belongings, her mind already working on how to salvage the operation. As she walked through the bullpen toward the exit, Burke fell into step beside her. "Ms. Washington," Burke said quietly, "could I speak with you?" "Outside for a moment?" They walked out of the station together, 2 women who looked like they were having a casual conversation. Once they were out of earshot of anyone else, Burke stopped and turned to face Riley. "I know who you are," she said simply. Riley's training kicked in immediately. Deny everything, reveal nothing, assess the threat. But something in Burke's eyes made her pause. "I'm not sure what you mean," Riley replied carefully. "You're FBI. Financial Crimes Task Force. You've been investigating corruption in our department." Riley felt her world shift. Her cover was blown, but by someone who might be an ally rather than an enemy. "What makes you think that?" she asked, still being cautious. "Because I just ran your name through federal databases and because I've been wondering for months why my colleagues have been acting strange." Expensive toys on cop salaries, sudden interest in certain types of calls, nervous conversations that stop when I walk into a room. Burke paused, then continued with emotion in her voice. I became a cop to serve and protect people. If there are criminals wearing badges in my department, I want them stopped. Riley made a quick assessment. Burke's record was clean, her financial situation was appropriate for her salary, and most importantly, she wasn't part of Torres's inner circle. Sometimes you had to take calculated risks. If what you're suggesting were true, Riley said carefully, what would you want to do about it? Help, however I can. And if I told you that certain people might be arrested very soon, how would you react? I'd ask if you need any assistance making sure the right people get arrested and the wrong people don't get hurt. Riley pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Chen. Meet at backup location. Bring files. Situation changed. Sergeant Burke, Riley said, I think we need to have a longer conversation. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in Chen's car in an empty parking lot, while Chen spread surveillance photos across the dashboard. Burke studied each image with growing anger and disappointment. Torres accepting envelopes of cash. Mitchell and Ricci loading stolen cars onto transport trucks. Financial records showing unexplained deposits. How long has this been going on? Burke asked. We think about 3 years for the car theft ring, Chen replied. But there might be other criminal activities we haven't uncovered yet. And you were planning to arrest them today? That was the plan before Agent Washington got detained by her own targets. Burke shook her head at the irony. Torres's paranoia saved him from walking into a trap, at least temporarily. The question now, Riley said, is whether we can still make this work. Torres is suspicious, but he doesn't know exactly what he's suspicious of. If we move fast, we might be able to salvage the operation. Chen looked at his watch. The warrants are still valid. We have teams standing by. But if we're going to do this, it has to be now, before Torres has time to think too much about what happened today. Burke straightened up in her seat. What do you need me to do? We need someone inside the station who can coordinate with us when we make the arrests. Someone who can make sure innocent officers don't get caught in the crossfire and evidence doesn't disappear. I can do that. But what about Torres? After what happened today, he's going to be watching everything. Riley smiled grimly. Let him watch. In about 2 hours, he's going to have bigger problems than wondering who I really am. As they finalized their plans, Torres was back at the station, making increasingly frantic phone calls. His conversation with Bobby Torino had not gone well. The fence was convinced that federal agents were closing in and was talking about shutting down operations and leaving town. You're being paranoid, Torres had insisted, but even as he said it, he wondered if Bobby might be right. The arrest of the woman with the BMW should have made him feel better. He'd taken action against a potential threat. But instead of relief, all he felt was a growing sense that he'd made a terrible mistake. He thought about Riley Washington's calm demeanor during questioning, her professional responses, the way she'd looked him in the eye when she said he'd be surprised by what he found. For the first time in 3 years of running his criminal enterprise, Detective Vincent Torres began to wonder if his luck was finally running out. He was about to find out just how right that feeling was. At exactly 2:47 p.m., Detective Vincent Torres was sitting at his desk filling out paperwork when his world came crashing down. He'd been trying to focus on routine police work, hoping to shake off the uneasy feeling that had been growing all day since the arrest of Riley Washington. He kept telling himself he'd done the right thing, that his instincts had been correct. He was wrong on both counts. The first sign of trouble came when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Bobby Torino's number, but the voice on the other end wasn't Bobby's. Detective Torres? This is Agent Patricia Coleman, FBI. We have Mr. Torino in custody, and he's been very helpful in explaining your business relationship. Torres felt the blood drain from his face. His hand gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. I think you have the wrong number, he managed to say. I don't think so. We also have Agent Riley Washington here, and she has quite a story to tell about her morning. The phone slipped from Torres's suddenly numb fingers. Around the bullpen, he could see other officers looking up from their desks, confused by his expression. Officers Mitchell and Ricci were across the room, but they'd noticed his reaction too. Through the station's front windows, Torres could see black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. Not just one or two, but a whole convoy. Men and women in FBI windbreakers were getting out, moving with the purposeful efficiency of agents executing planned arrests. Sergeant Burke appeared at his elbow, though he hadn't seen her approach. "Detective Torres," she said quietly, "I need you to stay calm and keep your hands visible." Torres turned to look at her, and in her eyes he saw something that made his stomach drop even further. She knew. Somehow Burke knew everything. "Lisa, what's going on?" he asked, though part of him already understood. "You're under arrest for racketeering, auto theft, conspiracy, and violations of civil rights under color of law." The FBI agents were inside the station now, moving through the bullpen with practiced precision. Agent Chen appeared at Torres's desk, flanked by two other agents. "Detective Vincent Torres, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Chen continued reading Miranda rights, Torres looked around the bullpen and saw his whole crew being arrested simultaneously. Mitchell had his hands cuffed behind his back near the coffee machine. Ricci was being led toward the exit in restraints. 3 other officers he'd thought were clean were also being arrested. Apparently his network had been larger than he'd realized. But where was Riley Washington? His question was answered when she walked through the front door of the station, no longer looking like a confused marketing consultant. She wore an FBI windbreaker and carried herself with the confidence of a federal agent who'd just completed a successful undercover operation. "Hello again, Detective Torres," she said as she approached his desk. "I told you that you'd be surprised by what you found." Torres stared at her in disbelief. "You're FBI? Special Agent Riley Washington, Financial Crimes Task Force. I've been investigating your car theft ring for 6 months. The irony hit Torres like a physical blow. He'd arrested the very agent who was investigating him. His paranoia and suspicion, the very instincts that had kept him ahead of the law for years, had led him to detain the person who was already building a case against him. "You played me," he said, his voice hollow. "Actually, you played yourself. I was just gathering evidence. But when you decided to arrest me this morning for stealing my own car, you gave us additional charges for false arrest, violation of civil rights, and obstruction of justice." As Torres was led away in handcuffs, Riley felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice was finally being served. Sadness because it was always disappointing to see people who were supposed to serve and protect turn into the very criminals they'd sworn to stop. Agent Chen appeared beside her, carrying a thick folder of evidence. "How many cars do we think we can recover?" Riley asked. "Preliminary count is 43 vehicles worth approximately $2.3 million. Some have already been shipped overseas, but we should be able to get most of them back to their owners." Sergeant Burke joined them, still wearing her regular police uniform but now sporting an FBI consultant badge that Chen had given her. "How are the other officers taking this?" Riley asked. "Mixed reactions," Burke replied. "Most are shocked, some are angry, and a few are asking how they missed the signs. But overall, people are relieved. Nobody likes the idea of working alongside criminals." Over the next several hours, the true scope of Torres's operation became clear. The car theft ring had been more sophisticated than even the FBI had realized. They'd stolen vehicles from hospital parking lots, shopping centers, airports, and residential areas across 3 states. The cars were then sold to a network of dealers who would either ship them overseas or strip them for parts. But the investigation had also uncovered something else: evidence of other criminal activities. Torres and his crew had been taking bribes to ignore certain crimes, selling information to drug dealers about police operations, and even stealing evidence from other cases to sell or destroy. Riley found herself in the unusual position of having to give testimony about her own false arrest. The body camera footage from Torres's patrol car would become a key piece of evidence, showing how the detective had detained her without probable cause and continued to hold her even after her paperwork proved legitimate. "In all my years as an agent," Riley told the federal prosecutor, "I've never been arrested by my own targets. It was surreal, but it also gave me insight into how they operated. They were so convinced of their own power that they thought they could arrest anyone who made them suspicious." The case became a textbook example of how corruption investigations can take unexpected turns. Riley's arrest had actually strengthened the case against Torres by providing additional federal charges and demonstrating the extent of his criminal behavior. 6 months later, Riley sat in federal court as Torres was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Mitchell got 12 years, Ricci got 10, and the other corrupt officers received sentences ranging from 5 to 8 years. Bobby Torino, who had cooperated with authorities, received a reduced sentence of 4 years. During her victim impact statement, Riley addressed the court about the broader implications of police corruption. When officers sworn to protect and serve become predators themselves, they don't just harm their immediate victims. They damage public trust in law enforcement and make it harder for honest cops to do their jobs. The badge represents service and sacrifice. When it's used as a shield for criminal activity, it tarnishes everyone who wears it with honor. Judge Patricia Martinez, who presided over the case, called it one of the most ironic investigations she'd ever encountered. The defendants' own criminal instincts led them to arrest the very agent investigating their crimes. It's a reminder that justice often comes from unexpected places. Riley received a commendation from FBI Director Sarah Chen, no relation, to Agent Chen for her undercover work and was promoted to Senior Special Agent. She was assigned to lead a new task force focused on police corruption, using her experience to train other agents on the complexities of investigating law enforcement officers. Sergeant Burke was offered a position with the FBI's Public Integrity Section, inspired by her role in bringing down the corruption in her own department. She accepted and now works full-time investigating police misconduct across the country. The coffee shop where it all began put up a small plaque commemorating the case. The owner, Mrs. Elena Martinez, had watched the arrest unfold from her window and later testified about what she'd witnessed. The plaque reads, "Sometimes the most important investigations happen in the most ordinary places." A year after Torres's conviction, Riley returned to that same coffee shop on the anniversary of her arrest. As she sat at the corner table where she'd met with Chen to plan the final phase of the operation, she reflected on how quickly everything had changed that morning. Her phone buzzed with a message from Agent Coleman, the retired prosecutor who had helped coordinate her rescue. "Saw the news story about your promotion. Proud of you, Agent Washington. Keep fighting the good fight." Riley smiled and looked out the window at the police station 3 blocks away. Under new leadership and with stronger oversight procedures, it was slowly rebuilding the community trust that Torres and his crew had damaged. It would take time, but progress was being made. She thought about Torres, now serving his sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. She wondered if he ever thought about that morning when his paranoia had led him to arrest the very person investigating him. Probably not with any humor, but Riley found a certain poetic justice in how it had all unfolded. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted, and sometimes justice comes wearing handcuffs instead of a badge. But in the end, the truth has a way of emerging no matter how deeply it's buried or who tries to suppress it. Riley Washington had learned that lesson the hard way, but she'd never forget it. And neither would the criminals who thought they could hide behind a badge.